Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. If you've been following the channel, you know that recently I put out a couple of music videos. So if you haven't seen those, make sure after this broadcast you check out the channel and the latest two videos. Every Hillbilly Cat song tells a story. And of course, it's a story about Elvis. Hi, Colleen, you're just in time. We're going to listen to this song, and then we're going to get started with another look at the Circle G, where we're going to bring in a lot of new voices.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian suit, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight, then back behind the velvet door. He gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, he the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, then I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned so bright.
Welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. If this is your first time here, there are two songs that are available as music videos that you can add to your YouTube music playlist out on the channel right now. Neither of them is this song we just heard, So if you think that I should release this song as a video so that you can add it to your YouTube playlist, let me know right now in the chat or in the comments, and maybe I can make that happen. But in this episode today, we're going to get back to the Circle G, which we've been looking at for several days now. Elvis has bought it, cost him over $400,000 at the time, which is around $4 million today. Because he looked at it and he saw a big cross. And that cross said something to him. And Keith is saying, I was talking to someone from Tennessee, and they told me the big cross was for a family member that drowned, or for the planes to know about the airport nearby. Keith, it's about the planes. And if you want to know for sure more about that, check out the Spa Guy. He's got several videos where he interviews the man who used to own the Circle G, Jack Adams, who was he sold airplanes from the small airport nearby. So airplanes and air stuff was his life. So that cross was a functional cross meant for the airport and for airplanes as a marker. They didn't indicate that it meant anything else. So the story about the family member is very nice. But he also put that pond into that area, that reservoir, and he put the bridge across it. So I don't think anybody had drowned in that particular pond. And on screen, we can see one of the trucks, although this is really a ranchero, which is kind of like an El Camino, for anybody that can remember those kind of cars. But they were like a half car, half truck. I knew some people that owned El Camino, and it was a lot of fun. So I can only assume that the rancheros were just as fun. But there's a guy that's driving it, and he's got a big smile on his face, and he's a guy that we've heard through this entire story was not happy with the purchase of the Circle G or any of the goings on at the Circle G, but here he is with the biggest smile that I've ever seen on his face in any picture that we've ever seen of him. It's Vernon Presley, Elvis's dad. So I think Vernon was having more fun than maybe he was letting on to some of the other guys, because he sure seemed to be liking driving this ranchero. And you can see on the side, it says the Circle G Ranch, and the G has a couple of wings, which mimic or echo the wings that are on the actual symbol painted right below of the, like a calligraphy G inside a big circle with the wings. And Marion saying, please make it happen with the song and the video. So Marion, I will see what I can do for you. I hope to get it out there. I'd like one of the other videos to make it to at least 100 views. So if we had just 50 people that went out there and watched it twice, it would make it to 100 views. And then I would feel really good about putting out another one. But I'm not teasing anybody either. And because Marion's asked, I'm definitely going to get this one out within the next couple of days. But back to the story of the Circle G. Obviously, Vernon isn't as dissatisfied, at least in this one picture, as we've been led to believe. But today we're going to talk about married life on the Circle G, because what happened while Elvis was living on the Circle G? Well, he got married. And of course, the place they came back to was the Circle G. Now, one thing I'm finding odd about the timeline is that we've talked about the cottage, and we've talked about the trailer that Elvis lived in, the one that he bought for himself, the Delta. And everyone agrees in the records that the trailer was purchased on March 3rd. There was an order put in for it. And everyone seems to agree that it was in place by the end of March, which means that it would have been in place when they came back from the honeymoon. But all the stories are that they lived in the cottage for a little while after the honeymoon and then determined they wanted to move to the trailer. So something's wrong about those stories, and I haven't determined what it is yet. But I'm just throwing it out there so that you guys know that. And kind of what I'm thinking is in early March, they lived in the cottage because that's all that was available. He'd purchased the 8 trailers for the other people. They'd gotten all set up. It took a little while. Elvis was actually very he was overseeing the contractors the whole time. So he would ride out every morning on a horse and go and check on everybody, how everything was getting set up on the part of the property that he had designated for the trailers, because they had to run electric, they had to run some water out there. And then he spent a lot of time there after they got it all set up. And so that was apparently Marchish. But obviously he planned to have a trailer from the very beginning if he put that order in on March 3rd. So a little bit of the myth kind of disappears there, but I'm sure they spent some time in the cottage and he didn't like it that well. And then they decided to go over to the trailer. So maybe when they came back from the Bahamas, after they got married, they went directly to the cottage or directly to the trailer. So let's take a look at a couple of pictures I've got for you. This one is of the cottage. So they spent some time in here at some point, and this is where they were during the story that Donna Presley tells, that her father was standing somewhere outside one of these windows, within earshot of one of these windows that we can see right here. And Elvis sat down at the piano that was in this cottage, and he sang From a Jack to a King, just for Earl Pritchett, because it was Earl's favorite song. And that's the kind of thing that Elvis did for his friends and family. Now we see a guy that was important in Elvis's life, and he was also here on the ranch, and it's Joe Esposito. But before we get to Joe, hi, Emma. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you. Before we get to Joe, let's hear what George Klein, who was also at the ranch at some point, because we know that his girlfriend, Barbara Little, contacted Dr. Nicopolis to come out and treat Elvis for saddle sores at some point. And what George said is, in becoming a ranch owner and turning the Memphis Mafia into a bunch of ranch hands, Elvis had given himself a tremendous challenge, which he threw himself into fully. Making plans for the ranch, Elvis seemed more energetic and in charge than he had been in a long time. So George noticed a change in Elvis and said he was happier and more energetic there. They often talked, the Memphis Mafia, about Elvis's need for a challenge to be his best self. And I think we could probably take that as a truism, that Elvis, he didn't do well when he was doing the same thing over and over. So when it was a challenge to perform in Las Vegas, he did it the best that anyone ever could. But by the end, it had become very dull. When he got into the movies, it was a challenge, but by the end, it was dull. When he got into making records, it was a challenge, But somewhere in the mid-60s, it became dull, probably because of the movie soundtracks that he was forced to record. And then at another point in his life, in the early 70s, late 60s, suddenly it was a challenge to record again. It was a challenge to try to get back to number one. It was a challenge to do the Aloha from Hawaii concert. He had a lot of different challenges that he put in front of himself, but when he didn't have a challenge, he didn't do that well. And I think that's what's being reflected here when George says, suddenly this ranch was a challenge. And it wasn't the kind of challenge that was impressing anybody else. This one was just for himself. So it was kind of a different kind of challenge than he'd really, I think, gotten into before. Most of the other challenges had been for very public reasons. And then Joe Esposito, who we see on screen, what he said is, so Elvis cast himself in the role of ranch foreman. He no longer looked like a famous singer or movie star, wearing a cowboy hat and sheepskin jacket and sitting tall in the saddle. He was a dead ringer for the Marlboro Man. Every morning, he saddled Rising Sun and rode out to issue instructions to the contractor on how to do things and where everything should go. So the reference to the Marlboro Man, I could barely say that was a cigarette brand. And they had a very famous ad with a cowboy. And it was very famous at the time that Elvis was living on the ranch. So Joe's comparing him basically to another marketing idol, an ideal or an idealized man, a countryman, a cowboy, someone who could get things done with their own hands. And that's kind of what Elvis is playing into at this time. And Jerry Schilling, who we know was out on the property, he says it was really beautiful at first. Sandy and I had a little trailer in front of the lake. So I don't know if we've seen pictures here of the lake and the cross yet. But there are pictures out there on the internet you can find. And then right in front of that lake, that's where Sandy and Jerry lived. And there was a little village community right there of all of these trailers. And we saw a picture of Elvis and Priscilla as they stood at the bridge that went over the lake. So that's the lake. And then somewhere in that area is where all these trailers were. Now, Priscilla Presley, she said about the way that she envisioned how life was going to be out on this ranch. And she said, I pictured us saddling our own horses and riding in the early evening or at dusk. My picture was of us alone, without an entourage. And later she says he liked it when everyone was together, and he got upset when they wanted to leave. So Priscilla's ideal of what was going to happen here was that they were going to be alone, just the two of them. Or at least have more opportunity for that. No entourage. But what he liked was when everyone was together. Well, that's the entourage. He liked the entourage, and he got upset when anybody wanted to leave. So he didn't want less people around him. He wanted the people that he had chosen to be around him. But Priscilla felt that it was supposed to just be the two of them. So that's just a little glimpse into, they've just gotten married, but their ideas of what is going to happen going forward in their life, well, they're not in sync at all, it doesn't look like. At least not from these statements. And these are both statements from Priscilla. Now on screen we can see a picture of Elvis and Priscilla. And this is the day they got married. May 1st. And so they're not at the ranch, but they've come not directly from the ranch, but the ranch is in the back of Elvis's mind while he's standing here with his arm around Priscilla. And we see Marty Lacker, his co-best man, and his other co-best man, Joe Esposito. Now, Marty, Joe, and Elvis are all looking at the camera, and they've all got grins on their faces. But Priscilla has the biggest smile of all of them, and she's looking directly at Elvis. Directly at Elvis. Her eyes are only for Elvis in this picture. And I just find that fascinating. That these three guys are all looking at the camera. They're very aware their picture's being taken. Priscilla seems to be aware, but she's not able to look at the camera or doesn't want to look at the camera. It's not really clear. But she's only looking at Elvis. So there must have been some point in time when he was uppermost in her mind. No matter what happens later, even though it doesn't happen much later. And Keith is asking if Priscilla was newly pregnant during these times and saying that this was a big catch for her. Yeah, it was a big catch, but in a way she already had him. I mean, so I don't know. Because of the way the divorce went down, she seems to have been very naive about the money that she could possibly have gotten from him. And it becomes much clearer in her mind in the later 70s. And then she becomes much more, I think, focused on the power and the money. But at this point in time, I don't know what she's thinking as she stands here and she's looking at Elvis. She could just truly be in love. But there's other indications that other stuff was going on before this anyway, so... and then there's all the rumors that Elvis was coerced into the marriage. And we haven't looked as a group at this at all, so I don't want to make any judgments about it. Everybody already has an opinion about it. It's a very famous event, so... The point of showing the picture here is just to indicate that this is what's happening while we're looking at these other things that are going on at Circle G. These are other events in his life that are very, very a huge effect on his life. They're impactful. This was maybe the one with the greatest impact of his whole life, and certainly for his afterlife. Because, of course, the three gentlemen that we see in the picture, they, of course, are no longer with us, but they were out of the picture as soon as Elvis was, and only Priscilla remained. Terry saying a wedding that should never happen. And Emma saying that she agrees with Terry and Keith. But whether it should or shouldn't have, it did. And they went back to the Circle G. And the two people that we see in this picture were with them. And of course, Marty went with them from the previous picture. He spent some time at Circle G. But here we see a couple that had their own trailer, because we learned that yesterday. And that's Joe and Joni Esposito. And this is, again, at the wedding, or maybe the other wedding reception. I'm thinking, well, let's look back at that other picture. Let's do some forensics here. Okay, you see where Joe has this bow tie on? This picture is the actual Vegas wedding picture. You see this suit that Elvis has on? It's got this like brocade pattern in it. Marty, who is the guy standing next to him, designed the suit and had it made. They kind of designed this pattern together so that his suit would stand out from everybody else's tux. He would have a very unique tux. That's the actual day. Now, when we go to the next picture, Now Elvis is wearing a shirt that's too big for his neck. And, he often had this phobia about his neck showing and felt that his neck was too thin. And we also saw a story in one of the other episodes where he called Ginger Alden a chicken neck. So he has this thing about his neck. And in this picture, I mean, maybe this is why, because his collar looks a little big here. And it is making his neck look slightly strange in this picture. And so I do not believe that this was the shirt that he was wearing. I think it's the same jacket, but I don't think it's the shirt that he was wearing. But if we look over at Joe, he's wearing a necktie. So again, I don't believe this is the same event. I believe this is the reception that they held at Graceland for all the people that did not get to come to the Las Vegas event. And that's why they're wearing these two different suits. But we're a little off track here because I'm really showing these pictures just so that we can see Joni. And you can see how beautiful she was. And that she and Priscilla were very friendly. And that this was one of the couples that, along with Sandy and Jerry, who we saw yesterday, they're out there on the ranch. Keith's saying that Jerry Schilling never really tells any dirt on any stories. And Jerry's still very in with EPE, so maybe that was a good move on his part, because he's still very much an active part of the current day myth. Everyone else is gone from it, although a lot of them are also gone altogether. And Debbie's saying, I think you're right, Matt, that these are pictures from 2 different days. And Emma's saying that Joni was beautiful, wasn't she? And that you never really noticed before. I think she was a showgirl or a model when Joe met her. I'm thinking a showgirl from Vegas, but or an actress. It was something like that. Something where her looks were important to the job. And of course he met her through Elvis. And she went on to marry somebody, I can't remember, somebody extremely famous. And through that marriage, she became related to Kim Kardashian. But I can't remember exactly what that was. But that's after the Circle G. So again, I'm getting away with the story. Here we see that picture of Vernon and his Circle G ranchero. Boy, he just looks super happy in this picture. And Terry saying that Red West was not invited to the wedding. Well, he was invited to the reception, but he wasn't invited to the ceremony. And he got extremely angry about that and he left. And he wasn't willing to cut Elvis any slack on it. He became very volatile about it. And maybe he was justified, but he took himself out of the proceedings that way. And Emma's saying that she's sure that Joni was a showgirl. And that she never knew that Joni was connected to the Kardashians. Yeah, I can't remember the exact. But she was like Kardashian's aunt, like Kim's aunt. And Debbie's saying, look at that lovely smile on Vernon. And Lauren is saying she loved Joni's hairstyle. All right, now we've come to a picture of a special place. Let's see if we can get back to it within the narrative that I've got here. Jerry Schilling said, you'd wake up in the morning. The horses would be drinking out of the lake. Elvis and Priscilla would ride over, and we'd go for a ride, then have breakfast. So we just got done hearing that Priscilla had expected them to be just by themselves. But before breakfast, they've already gotten another couple and they're having breakfast with two other people. Now, Donna Presley said, "We didn't own the horses, but we did ride them. It was amazing. It was just a great time to go out there and ride horses and have fun and just have a wonderful time like any other family. We were a normal family, but he was famous. It was very difficult for him to go out and do things with just family and friends unless he did it in the middle of the night. I said he had to live his life like a vampire a lot of times because he can only come out at night when everybody else was gone. He loved having a good time. He loved having fun. It was just that kind of guy." And so Donna's bringing up a really interesting point that normally Elvis was very nocturnal and he lived his life the opposite of what most of us do. He would get up around 2 or 3 in the afternoon and eat breakfast, around 3 or 4 in the morning or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then stay up very late, going to bed about 6 a.m. So here on the ranch, that's basically reverse, because if you're going to do this stuff with the horses and you're going to do the riding, you're not doing most of this at night. Now, you might be doing some partying in the trailers at night, but a lot of that horse riding and stuff, that's got to be during the day. So he had to have changed his schedule to a more normal, as we would think of it, schedule in order to really enjoy the ranch. And so Keith is asking, did Elvis do his EP on the grill? So if you look carefully at this barbecue grill that is up on the screen, you can see an E on the left and a P on the right. They're in the flat top surfaces where like you would put your plates and other cooking stuff while you built up that fire in the middle and cooked your meat over those flames. And what was happening here was they were doing some grilling, and I'm assuming probably on cheap charcoal grills that would have been very popular at the time, probably out near the trailers. And Elvis was loving it. He was loving this grilling and the kind of the communion that went on around it. Because when you grill this meat with a bunch of guys, they're standing around and the wives are bringing out dishes, and they probably got like a picnic table, and you have this little get together that lasts a couple 3 hours where you grill up this meat and everybody gets full and you just have a lot of community. Elvis like really got into that. So he had this barbecue grill made so they could do it, in Elvis style. And so this ranch is becoming, it's an emotional infrastructure in grass and bricks and trailers and horses and cattle and a barn that he's built in order to satisfy his longing. He's longing for this simple life, for the peace, for the family. And this ranch is now the stage for that longing. He's set a stage just as if he was putting on a play. He's made, or like a child, when you see like build a little city or a little farm or something to play with their toys on. Maybe they've got the small cars and they build the maps of the cities that they drive around, and that's what he's done in real life. But it's all to bring out this feeling of family and simplicity. But it's also one giant container of contradiction, because Elvis wants solitude and perhaps solitude with Priscilla, like she's dreaming about just the two of them. But at the same time, he wants all of the presence of his chosen family, these people that he's chosen to live on the ranch. And he seeks normalcy, and he's orchestrating it with things like potlucks and the other activities like the barbecues that he's doing. And so he has an illusion of freedom out here on the ranch, but he's still got the constraints of all the fame. He's got the 10-foot high fence that he's built all the way around the property. Nothing can get to him on this property right now, but he can't get away from the property. In a sense, it's just a giant Graceland, but it's one that was completely unwritten at the time that he stepped onto it. Just had a couple of notes: the cottage, the barn, the cattle, and now he's written the entire symphony for him and his friends to hear all by themselves. And George Klein said, Elvis may have been having trouble steering his career the way he wanted it to go, but now he had a place where he could live the way he wanted to, surrounded by the people he wanted around him, far from the call of Hollywood or the influence of the Colonel, or even the needs of the fans at the Graceland gates. So George has seen that this is a refuge from everything for Elvis. And Emma's saying that because her initials are also EP, she needs a barbecue just like this. It's hard to believe that this barbecue still exists, right? Or did at the time of the picture. I don't know how old the picture is. And Priscilla said, Elvis was having a ball, and there were days he didn't even want to take time out to eat. He'd walk around with a loaf of bread under his arm in case hunger pains struck. Now, you and I, because if you're watching this broadcast, I'm absolutely certain you're a big Elvis fan. You've gone beyond the music and you're wanting to know about Elvis's life and Elvis's history. Well, we know that there's one hobby that Elvis had that he loved that lasted through his entire life. It was eating. He loved to eat. People talk about how he would only eat one thing and he would eat it until he was so sick of it he couldn't eat it anymore, and they kind of combine that into a very limited diet. Well, that wasn't true. He ate a whole bunch of different kinds of stuff. Sometimes he did focus on only one thing, but he did enjoy a large variety of different foods throughout his life, but he liked them in a lot of quantity. And when he did find something that he liked, he just wanted to go all in at it until he just couldn't consume it anymore. And yet here he is. He's found another hobby that is so all-consuming. All he's eating is bread out of a loaf that he's carried around with him. Just sliced bread out of a bag, like you buy at the grocery store. And Debbie's asking, why have they left Circle G in such a state? And Emma's saying that it's heartbreaking and it should be a special place and it should be maintained and looked after. Emma's saying the tiles have been removed from the barbecue and it does not look like this anymore. So the reason that it's not maintained is it doesn't generate any money. And the reason it doesn't generate any money is that nobody with the vision to understand what could be put at the property is willing to take hold of the property. And if you listen to Joel, who runs Graceland recently, There was a clip of him up on the internet for a short period from something he said at one of the latest Graceland events. He makes it clear he doesn't really have any interest in Circle G, that there are a lot of different business reasons that you shouldn't have anything to do with Circle G, that and it's kind of like all anyone could think to do is say, hey, there's a big field out here, and once we get people here, we'll just dump them in the field. And then you just walk around, you look at the field, and maybe you see the broken remains of the barbecue, and you see maybe a house that maybe they've refurbished up in the front, but maybe you get to go through the barn. I mean, this isn't really what tells the story of Elvis. It's kind of the same problem with Graceland itself that I have. Graceland is a wonderful place to go to visit if you have never been there and you want to see the house and you want to see the inside of the house. It's going to be expensive. But the only reason to go is to get inside the house and see what you've never seen with your own eyes, and to get to walk around on the property, although you can do that for free. Like once a day, typically. There's some days where you can't, but once a day, typically, it's open for an hour to go up there and pay respects at the meditation garden, and you see the whole property from the walk that you take. So, but if you're going to travel all the way there, there's no reason not to spend the money, even though it's a lot, to get inside. That's the real attraction. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that they have with it. And they call all of this together a museum. But if you've ever been to a real museum, this does not, and I love Angie Marchese, but this does not reach the level of a museum. And if you go into like one of their newer buildings, which is not really new, it's been there since like 2014, so it's like 11 years old now. It has a lot of open space, and it's one of the free exhibits that you can get to just by walking over to this area. There's a couple of restaurants there, and in this giant area that they have, it's full of Elvis jumpsuits that weren't Elvis's, that other people wore. You know, like different costumes that were inspired by Elvis, which is interesting, but it takes up almost the whole area. And there's some glass display shelves, and they have some stuff on it. Stuff never changes. And a lot of those glassed-in areas are filled with archival boxes, which are just boxes. Okay, so and it doesn't tell any nothing is in any kind of arrangement to tell any kind of story about anybody's life. It's just kind of thrown out there. Now, Graceland survives because it's Graceland, and we want to get into the house. But this is also the reason that other Elvis museums don't survive. You can't just throw out a bunch of Elvis stuff and think that that's going to be enough. You have to bring people into Elvis. So if I was in charge of this land, I know exactly what I would do with it, and people would come here by the droves. But nobody who is willing to put up the kind of money that it would take to get to the point where you could entertain a whole lot of people has done that yet. And it's not going to be cheap. You know, it's not like any of us would be able to do it. We need to get somebody like a Bill Gates on our side. And if he would love Elvis, then we'd have no problem getting this done. But like just us, I don't know, it's rough. That's what's haunted Circle G and Vernon's house on Dolan for the last however long. But again, I've gotten way away from the story, and I need to get back to this barbecue. And Keith is saying that Lamar said in the 1950s he ate eggs and sauerkraut and then went back to it in the late 70s. That's true, Keith. And Lamar has said all kinds of stuff, and very little of what Lamar says coincides with other things that Lamar says. So, for instance, Lamar has more than one story about how he and Elvis met. And maybe someday I'll tell you those stories. They are available in my book, which you can find on Amazon, called Colonel and the Boys. And Pat says they could fix the Circle G up and put more horses on there. And they probably could, but right now, nobody owns it who, like, actually handles horses. The people who own it are an investment group. So they're looking to do something with money on it and then have more money come back to them. And I think they don't believe that just the horses are going to bring back enough. And Keith says, put him in the field at Circle G. We'll get this thing open. And Lauren is asking, Keith, what's sauerkraut? Sauerkraut is it's a German dish, really. It's very German, and maybe Marion could explain it best. I think it's made with cabbage. Is that what they make the sauerkraut with? But it has a very sour taste when you put it in your mouth. And a lot of us in America like to eat it with hot dogs. And I actually had some sauerkraut and sausages the other day, and they were amazing. I love sauerkraut. But it's a kind of a plant, but now that you're asking me, I don't know. That sounds terrible, right? And Keith's saying that you put it on a hot dog. Lorna, Marion is saying that sauerkraut is sour white cabbage. Very healthy. Thank you, Marion, for coming to my rescue. Cabbage. Sour white cabbage. And it's excellent, especially if it's fixed correctly. It's excellent. And it's excellent with sausages. So to get back to this story, Priscilla Presley said, well, we've already read that one, that he'd walk around with that loaf of bread. And Jerry Schilling said, it was like we were all just friends. They spent a lot of time by themselves, referring to Elvis and Priscilla. And when they came over, it was just like neighbors dropping by. We'd go out riding and maybe have a little picnic. And it was as if things had kind of calmed down for a little while. Now, Jerry's idea of just like neighbors, where they dropped by and they went out riding on horses and had a little picnic, I've never had a neighbor that I went on a picnic with or out riding. So Jerry has a very kind of an Ozzie and Harriet outlook on what neighbors are. And I wonder, I don't think that was the way that he grew up. I mean, he spent a lot of time with the kids in the neighborhood, but I don't know if they did any picnics or anything together. So everybody's living a somewhat Andy Griffith Mayberry kind of lifestyle. They kind of moved to that within their own thinking while they're out here on the ranch. And it soon became apparent that Priscilla was pregnant. Not long after, Elvis, Priscilla, Jerry, and Sandy, while on horseback, rode up on a cow that was giving birth right there on the ranch. And Jerry said, it was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that. It was like we were in the wild, wild west. And this was the point where nature, family, and the future had converged. And it was like they'd seen a sign of that. It had all come together in the birth that they witnessed together of this calf. This unexpected event. So he's seen a cross. They told him to buy the property. While he's on the property, he's seen the birth of new life. And that must have felt like the flowering of all the construction and building that he'd been doing. He'd done all this work, and now the fruits of his labor were suddenly, right in front of his very eyes, coming to life. And Priscilla Presley said what seemed like a new life had begun. I look back at those weeks as a remarkable lull in the middle of a storm. Elvis was between pictures. I've never seen him so free. He was having fun. It was almost like a commune effect. And so Priscilla is referring to the hippie communes of the late 60s that were going on at this time, where a lot of people were coming and living together outside of normal societal rules. And that's something like what was happening here, but this was a more structured tribalism. The communes were fairly disorganized in reflections of anarchy, like nobody's in charge. Or a small group of people might have been grouped around a single person, but it would have been more like 5 or 6, maybe 10 people at a time. Like Charlie Manson was an example of this kind of living, and he had an unusually large group. But Elvis was very structured, and unlike Charlie and all the rest of them, nobody's living in the dirt. Elvis isn't going to have anything like that going on. This is a much more, almost like a Disney version of what Elvis believes a neighborhood should be. So Disney built Main Street in Disneyland, which is a reflection of what Disney believed was the best of America. And Elvis has done the same thing with this circle of trailers out on the Circle G. And I see that, oh, hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. We were thinking, Anna says that she was actually driving on the road and had to pull off because she's missing the live and just wanted everyone to know that she was thinking about us. And we were thinking about you too, Anna. So thank you so much. And you drive safely. You can always watch us in the reruns. And there's a discussion going on about the sauerkraut and how a lot of people have never liked cabbage. You will not know that this is cabbage when you eat it. It is far different. It is a completely different, not cabbage experience. It's the closest thing I could think of is maybe corn, beef, and cabbage. But this is a much, much more sour cabbage. And so you might really like it if you give it a chance. It comes in a jar that you can find at the grocery store, a glass jar. In the condiment section, you'll probably find it. And Terry's saying, I would love to taste cornbread. Cornbread, corn muffins, I love them, Terry. You buy Jiffy cornbread mix here in the States. I don't know if it's available over there. I think you just add eggs and water or eggs and milk. So you should probably be able to make some for yourself. You can't really mess it up. It's an old cowboy thing, so obviously somebody that's spent a lot of time making cornbread, they can make some great cornbread, and you can't touch them, but anybody can make cornbread with a cornbread mix, and it's probably going to come out fairly edible and taste pretty good. And Keith is saying that rumor had it that Elvis lost his wedding band a few times on the ranch. Yeah, there's a few different stories about which wedding band was lost, and you can find some different ones out there. I've kind of just stayed away from that story because it's there's so many of them. But I think there's some interesting symbolism within those stories, because whichever one of them lost their ring, it's the loss of a vow. And it's like right at the beginning of the relationship, and it mirrors the loss of the vow throughout the relationship. Of at least one of them, if not both. And Patsy and I still say they should have put horses on the Circle G, like for today, like still today. Yeah. Like if there was a working barn or something out there. Yeah, that would be great. So we didn't get any farther than this picture with the barbecue today. I do have a lot more stuff, and I keep trying to get to it, but we're having such great discussions in the comments, and I want to thank everybody for coming in today. And if you like today's live stream, make sure that you hit the like button. Even if you're watching this later on a rerun, hit that like button, put a comment, chat, subscribe, tell people that you know love Elvis about the channel, because we got real stories with real facts coming out here, with pictures that you haven't seen anywhere else probably, and a lot that you probably have, but stories for sure that almost nobody knows or remembers. And we're putting it all together in a brand new way, and we're telling the stories far differently than they ever have been in the past. And so today, I'm going to leave you guys with another song. This one is not yet out there on the channel, but if you guys like it, we could probably make it happen. And you guys keep on taking care of business.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. "6 is 3, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old," he said with quiet grace, "to remember her love and see our children's face." He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of her hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it